From West Texas soil to a statewide name, one local winery is proving things really do get better with age.
KCBD News Channel 11's Imani Jackson went to the celebration today as it marks 50 years of winemaking and it looks ahead to what's next.
But it's just amazing to think back 50 years that this winery, being now the biggest winery in the state, in Little Oklahoma, get to represent, make some of the best wine, and just be proud of what's been established and what got started.
That sense of pride filled Llano Estacado Winery as owners, employees, and community members gathered for a ribbon cutting, celebrating 50 years of winemaking in West Texas. Founded in 1976, Llano Estacado Winery began as a project led by Texas Tech professors and local investors, determined to prove quality wine could be made right here in town. Over the years, the winery continued to grow, building an early success, expanding production, and earning recognition beyond the South Plains.
A lot of people thought that growing grapes and making wine in Texas would be challenging, and then Lubbock, doubly challenging. We're at the west end of the Bible Belt. We're in a agricultural culture, but it's more cotton growing and row crops.
Despite those challenges, the winery gained national attention in the 1980s, helping put Texas wine on the map. Today, Llano produces more than 100,000 cases of wine each year, every bottle produced right here in town, making it the largest premium winery in Texas.
So nowadays, it's very competitive in the marketplace that we're in. We're not competing against just domestic wines coming out of California or even other West Coast states. We're competing against the world.
Even with that competition, community support has always been there.
Thank you, first of all, for taking a chance on Texas wine. No one really had to. The world doesn't need another wine, but it's really fun to be able to turn some heads and put some smiles on people's faces when they try our product.
As they mark 50 years, they are already planning ahead. Plans include new tasting rooms in Lubbock and Fredericksburg, an expanded Hill County estate, and updates to the flagship winery, continuing to build on a legacy that started right here. Imani Jackson, KCBD, News Channel 11.